our teams are often running their operations with a limited view of or limited understanding of what is happening indoors. So by bringing these different data streams in this integration surface, CAD, BIM, real-time data, occupancy, and keep building, you actually start addressing some of the problems that you captured here, right? When it comes to inside the facilities, what I come across most often is asset mapping, space planning. We talked about occupancy, but when, also visitors, people who spend 90% of their time indoors, or safety and security, a big picture that brings together a lot of workflows and a lot of problems in this space. In my case, from indoor.js lens, it starts with a map, an indoor map, and it requires our customers, owners, operators to have an accurate layout of a building, which we characterize as floor plans. But where do they come from? They come from, if it's a new build, BIM models, if available, CAD drawings. But there's clean CAD, messy CAD, still data. PDFs, sometimes rolled up blueprints that needs to be hand digitized. And then we have the indoor map that we created. Now, how do we operationalize that, right, in the field? Just an example of a field technician or a facility technician addressing a work order. Let's start from there, right? They are receiving an email with a URL to a work order that says electric panel fault, building A, level 2, south wing. Okay, tap on the link. They can smart launch an ArcGIS Indoors mobile application, which points to the exact location of where the work order is going to be conducted. And that location might have a 360-degree image attached to it, now showing the context of the work order environment without being physically there. You can see the clearances if there's a safety issue, or if they need any special equipment or tools, maybe a ladder for a high-up electrical box, all of them without being in the room. And that's basically, an operations twin in action. And then what happens next is the same technician needs to go to the room to address the work order, right? And they can use the same application for wayfinding and navigation with real-time indoor positioning and just go straight ahead to the room. Okay, conduct the work order. It's a complete life cycle. Now it's time to update the records, the work order records, the inspection records, maybe take pictures of it, update asset notes, right? Flow it back into their field applications. It can be ArcGIS field maps or something else, right? And integrate with the third party or their enterprise asset and work order management systems. This is one workflow, but boots on the ground, how you can actually start operationalizing a location-based digital twin. So, yeah, that's at least with indoor.js what we are striving to achieve.
Sure. Other thoughts from the panel here?
Sure, I'll go next. So we got to think about, what digital twin is providing us. It's decision support, right? We're able to operationalize that data to make decisions. So what you're seeing here, these are just data feeds. You have to have an organization that's ready to ingest this data, serve it up, and really solve the problems of the organization. Because a lot of times it's, okay, now we have access to this data, this real-time data. We have a BIM model. Let's put it together, see what it solves. But it may not be solving any problem because you got to get the right stakeholders in the room. You got to understand exactly the information they need to make decisions based on their function within the organization. So we really have to think about it as a decision support tool. And then there's different levels of that, right? So there's your descriptive twin. That's where it's describing the current situation. Then you have a predictive twin. Now you start introducing AI and other different type of analytical models. And that helps you kind of predict what could happen if this asset isn't performing or this occupancy of the room gets too large. And then you have prescriptive. Now it's going to start telling you, hey, why don't you think about doing this, Mike? The system's going to help you with that. And then ultimately the highest level is autonomous, right? And I don't think too many people are there yet, unless maybe aerospace, but that's where the computer's making the decision for you, and it's a continuous feedback loop. So thinking about the organization and how it's structured and its readiness is very important.
All right, well, I'll take the bait. So one of the really interesting things is, so for aerospace models, I mean, digital twins, as we were talking earlier, they've been around for decades, right? So specifically when we're starting to talk about space systems, things like that, I don't have the ability to go touch it later. I don't have the ability to go fix it later. I don't have a lot of other things. So we have to really worry about reliability early. We have to understand how things could fail. And after I do 20 years of testing, environmental testing, everything else, I have to understand that before I even launch the system. Otherwise, I don't know what I'm going to get. Now, that depends on what classification system you want to have. If you want to have like a Class A, like human spacecraft, that's one thing. If I want to have, like a Starlink that could, has a some type of geomagnetic storm and brings down the entire launch. But like those things are opposite ends of the spectrum, but still, like that's the type of understanding you have to have. So one of the challenges for us is understanding the valid, like how long that data is valid, right? Because if it's a transient type thing, will I understand that if something happens today, will this actually impact my maintenance procedures of tomorrow and the future? Or on the other side, was it just just a little hiccup? But hiccups are never good, right? So another thing is when we typically are making our digital twins, especially in the beginning, we are going to use idealized things about all the hardware, everything else that's happening, right? So I know that I'm going to make the best bearing in the world. I'm going to ensure that there's no issues with clearances, things like that. Well, until you make it, then there's going to be some tolerancing and everything else. And each one of these little hardware artifacts need to get replicated into your models. So how do you do that? That's by ensuring that you have all your telemetry getting back into the systems and understanding how all these things feed to your higher level models. So maybe it's going to be like a lower level decision type model, or it's going to be higher engineering to the fractions of a wavelength type model, depending on what you're making.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, great points, guys. Just going back to what Mike said at the end, which is the ultimate goal of having full autonomy, right? Full autonomous models. I think what could happen there is what we're hearing about right now in AI with agentic AI and with the world models. And essentially, like, this is where you go from digital twins to digital triplets, right? You can have a SAD model or SAD where you have sense, act, decide. I think most of what's happening right now is going to the sense step, a bit on the act step, right, where some of that happens manually, where somebody goes out there and does the boots on the ground, the fixing, the adjustments. And then the decide piece is where you have contextual thinking, where you have the agentic aspect of AI that's now all the hype, 2025, 2026, and now going forward is talking about world models. And I'm sure we'll touch more on world models shortly, but this is how you can get to that next layer of full autonomy.
Thank you. So, Michael, you brought up about data to information to knowledge for decision making. And so love that paradigm where we stack up and we are collecting the information and analyzing what's going to really take us to the next level. So Hamza, I want to direct a question to you. As we're talking about all the data that rolls into the system that's serviced up to the top, how can we use AI technologies to bring data integrity and trust such that we can put more faith in those outcomes, that we can actually feel comfortable putting them into play in our businesses or our arenas we work in?
Yeah, that's a great question. The way I think of it is we're not chasing clean or perfect data, right? If that's what you're chasing, you're going to get stuck chasing it, and it's going to get in the way of getting productive and producing some value. I think what we're trying to do is, and where AI can be really helpful, is explicitly calling out that the data is messy, right? Realizing the data is messy and understanding that within those constraints of messy data that's multimodal, that is not perfectly structured and tabular, what can we do with it, right? What information can we capture from it? Are the models that we're putting in place able to handle the multimodality? Are they able to handle it well? Today we say there are multimodal models, but they really do struggle with some types of data over others, right? They do great with well-structured data. When it comes to unstructured data, they scrape some pieces of it, but there's still issues with IDP and OCR, with the character extraction or the content extraction from documents, images, and videos. So I think really to kind of summarize is focusing on the fact that the data is messy and will continue to be messy, but what can we do with that messy data that still provides value is going to be the where we truly kind of have that leap, right? Cross that chasm and make it to the other side.
So it's kind of funny because I cheated and took notes, right? The first four words are data can be messy. So the thing is, for geospatial data, right? Ideally, we're trying to capture what's happening in that moment, but as we also know, that it's a fleeting moment. So I was just looking at the number of commercial providers there are for civil synthetic capture radar, or you throw in electro-optical or LiDAR, otherwise so forth. So on each one of them can have their own proprietary data format, which is terrible, right? So then you have to look at like data abstraction layers to ensure that we actually can, or data translation layers, so you can actually get the data to where it needs to go into the right level. But the hardest thing is, one, if it's all supposed to be the same source of truth, well, if I don't have to figure out that translation between them, like what's actually truth? I mean, it could be something simple as like, which digital elevation model am I using? What is the standard of the geodetic system? Well, get the point. Basically, what the backer of all your data is going to. So, and how you're actually going to tie those back to what truth is.
So, kind of contextualizing the AI discussion here. So we're trying to utilize AI in the design process and touching on, how it's a great tool for understanding gaps in data. We're finding great success during the design process and, validating our models, our BIM models. So ensuring that data is rich, right? So the asset information is extremely important as you're going through the design process to ensure that lifecycle management. So when we hand it over to the owner, they have all that asset information ready to be ingested into their asset management systems. So that's one way we're using it. Another way that we're seeing it being used in the airport space is really like summarizing business processes, like helping reduce the time for a business process. So a simple thing like, hey, we need to have a technology project within this airport. Okay, give me a scope of work. What does that mean? Well, that could take a day and 3 days to process. So we're just trying to, we're trying to pick the low-hanging fruit on what's taking the most time, given the most pains in the organization, and how can AI help us do that? And the owners are just really excited about that because it's freeing them up to actually run the operation, which is their true intent. So it's a couple ways that we're seeing it being applied in the industry.
From GIS standpoint, we leverage geospatial AI and agentic AIs in many ways. When we look at indoor GIS, things come inside. We are also working on providing a venue for our users to interact with their indoor spaces through queries, right? Like being able to interact with the built environment, asking questions like, where are my assets? When is the next work order due? Or when are the next inspections due on floor 2? For space planners to be able to ask questions like, okay, what is the most underutilized space on floor 3? And these answers are valuable because then you can do space optimization with more, informative data coming into your way, right? And it's also a matter of trust when it comes to AI. When we talk about facilities, not just AI, but any technology requires a buy-in from the end user, especially within the facilities. Workflows can be very unforgiving because now we are talking about addressing inspections, work orders, sometimes enabling first responders with response planning or emergency response. So these are critical workflows that require a lot of trust. We are working on it, weaving it into our technologies, and at the same time providing with, the map makers, the GIS analysts, with tools that can help them map faster, right? where agentic AI again can be a value.
All right, thank you. So we'll dig into a little more of AI, then we're going to move on from that. But Kyle, the application of AI, it enhances these systems. Where do you see it enhancing the most? But also, who do you see it helping the most? And I ask this because we all know that there's all kinds of different buzz around about AI, the concerns and also the excitement. So
absolutely. So I'm going to pull the thread back from the data can be messy, right? So most people want to see things in human readable form, right? But most machines don't care about human readable form, right? So if we can get the raw data out to, and their engineering counts, things like that, to actually our AI agents or models, that allows them to actually do the work the way the machine's supposed to be doing it. It's supposed to adding unnecessary complications from us. So the real thing that we use it for is typically for sense making and characterization, understanding. Yes, if I can do the translation from engineering counts to a specific engineering unit, great. But do I need to, as long as it's still properly calibrated otherwise? So the biggest thing is to understand how that all really comes together. Specifically, where we can do that is to identify risks in our systems, understanding that there's characterization outside of our normal preventative maintenance or we'll say corrective maintenance type actions, things like that. So I'd say it's most useful to the operator and the user because we're trying to reduce the workload while also maximizing the information we're getting from the systems.
I can just chime in after what Kyle just said. The one thing I think about, just like kind of looking at a historical view of where analytics came in, right? Where like with traditional analytics, the question that's being answered is what happened? With AI, or now called traditional machine learning, right, which is what was really, really cool 2 years ago, and now it's historical, is now it tells you what could happen, right? It does predictions in the future. Now with world models, it moves it a little bit further, and it becomes what would happen or what will happen if we act a certain way, which is really important here for this field because you've got you're at the intersection between digital and physical, right? And the physical world, which is what world models try to understand, is every action has a reaction, and there's causality that happens, right? Things do not magically happen or exist out of nowhere. So I think that's a very critical thing. Now, world models are still very, very nascent. They're just getting started. They're not at a point where LLMs are in terms of maturity, but the value they will provide, the promise that they could put forward is going to be incredible. So that's one area I'm super excited about and want to see how that factors in for digital twins specifically.
Yeah, an area I'm really excited about is agentic AI within digital twins. So if we think about it, once we connect that real-time data to the physical, object, now we're visualizing, what's happening in real time. Now, what do we do with that data, right? It takes someone sitting there monitoring that data, monitoring its performance, and watching it. We don't have the time for that. So that's where agentic AI comes in, is able to say, hey, once it hits a certain threshold, why don't you send me an email, send me a text message, and alert me. I don't need to sit here and watch this dashboard. Like, who has time for that? So that's a kind of a new phenomenon that we figured out once we started developing digital twins, 5-6 years ago in the infrastructure space. It's like, great, we got these dashboards now. That creates a new role. And most owner agencies don't create new roles. They're trying to reduce them. So that's a great use case for agentic AI within digital twins.
I think I will go back to the previous example for space planners, right? What I described was an interaction with an AI interface, but it really is surfacing context better, faster, simpler, in a more understandable fashion, more summarized. Just simply having that access as a support, as a human conducting work is, I think, a huge value for owners and operators.
Oh, go ahead.
So actually, along those lines, one of the things that you're mentioning that really is important on like the mission operations side is like alarm fatigue, right? So if you just keep seeing the same alarm over and over and over again, are going to stop responding to it. So understanding that, is this actually something normal or not? Like, for example, we had a system that every time it made a new connection with a specific asset, it had 30 alarms, and we were like, all right, we can disposition each one of them every time. Well, let's create the alarm overlay so I never have to see that again. And then if it's something non-standard, then we actually should see those alarms. So we can use AI to really characterize exactly what's happening and then assist with sense making.
Yeah, that's a great point, Kyle. Actually, I have a great use case or example of that. So we instrumented a bridge in New York, monitoring the structural health of it. And I think there was 400 plus sensors that we instrumented it with. And for the first year, that's exactly what happened. We had alarm fatigue, and we didn't know what was true, what was not. So it took us a year to really calibrate those sensors and understand the data we were getting and start setting those thresholds and that benchmark through machine learning models when it was still a thing. But that it really took some time to calibrate that. So that's a great point. It's not flip the switch and you're hitting the road running. It's flip the switch. Let's see what kind of data we're getting from those IoT sensors. Is it valuable? We need to have a subject matter expert determine that. So yeah, that's a valid point. Thanks for bringing that up.
It's a great example of doing more with less. Yeah. All right, so Michael, we're going to come back to you again. So we live in a world of where we're inundated with best practice. Everyone talks about best practice on this and best practice on that. And then we know we have software companies who are doing a great job at selling software, and it's best practice. But often best fit really comes in and kind of, so everyone's going to be at a different place, and we need to make sure that the solution fits the needs. So how do you go about assessing the needs of an organization, the maturity level, et cetera, to make sure that they're getting what meets their needs the closest?
Great point, Paul. So I'm sure you've all heard the adage, if you've seen one airport, you've seen one airport. They're just so different. Every agency is so different from the other. And the thought of taking one software application and kind of lift and shift and bring it to each airport, that's just not a reality. So what the approach that we take is, first, what problem are we trying to solve? Number one. And then we try and understand what the organizational initiatives are and making sure that we're aligning with that organizational initiative. So great examples, we're seeing some Snowflake integrations per se. And we get involved with an operations department. They say, hey, Mike, we want all this to be stored in this database over here. Having the insight, knowing that organizationally they're going to a Snowflake, that saves people a lot of headache, and it gives other folks access to that information. So kind of backing it back out, aligning it with organizational goals is important. You don't always have that, luxury. A lot of times you're working with a couple different departments that are trying to optimize their silo. So that's not always a luxury that you have, but the better organizational awareness, that helps. And then you're looking at, obviously, the technology, the data, the processes, and the people. Because ultimately, you're turning this application over to people. And are they able to use it? So in every engagement that we have, there's an adoption and change management strategy. So this is where we are, this is where we're going, and this is how we're going to get there, team, as a whole. And we really listen to the naysayers because they have some very valid points, and we try to incorporate that into this process. So it comes down to the people is honestly the trickiest part.
Absolutely.
I think I will take it from, people, process, technology, and if it's a Venn diagram, it's a very famous framework in computer science forever, maybe, but data in the middle and the intersection, right? And what does it enable? It enables us to hone in and just really try to understand our customers from technology standpoint, what their needs are. What is the problem space? What can they leverage, this technology for, right? And then, are they ready? What type of data they have? Like in our case, Floor plan data is what they're looking for, starting indoor mapping. Is it CAD? Is it BIM? Some buildings don't have any footprint left behind, older buildings. It requires the customer to, do a laser scan and leverage point clouds to be able to generate, reconstruct the floor plans. Understanding where the customer is at, where the data is at. Is there a, implementation use case, an immediate need they have in mind? It can be mapping the asset locations. Simply just, let's start from there. Let's not create a huge system, but let's just map to make sure we know where our AEDs are, fire extinguishers are, sprinklers are, right? And the second thing is also, it helps to land and expand. I see our customers, some of them start from the immediate need, asset mapping, and then they realize they see the value in that implementation and scale up and use the same map for space planning, space optimization. Now I can drag and drop and assign my workforce in the right offices, right? Scale up, provide the same map to your safety teams, and then scale up in an airport, start providing the same map to your passengers for a wayfinding experience or a better airport experience. Because airports are huge, huge malls. If they didn't have the airlines or the flights coming in and out, it's a huge space. And sometimes starting simple, small, with a proof of concept, with a pilot, not necessarily a full implementation, and growing that has been a success is what I see in my markets.
Yeah, that last point is perfect. That's actually what I was, something I wanted to dig a bit deeper into, which is starting small and starting with a POC. That's kind of become our thing at Ops7. That's what we do. We build really, really, really fast. And now, thankfully, there are a lot of tools that help you build fast, but essentially we're very much of the mindset of it's so much easier to show them a prototype that is clickable, that gets the idea across, than it is to build a pitch deck or a slide deck or a memo and then set up a meeting to talk about meeting and next steps. No, I'll show you the thing. And you might be wondering then, like, what do we charge for? What do we build when it comes time to building? Well, then you can make it scalable, you can make it stable, you can make it secure, and so on and so forth. I think that, back to some of the points that Mike was saying, which is, the best practices, you might be coming upon an idea that sounds really great in theory, but you really want to see with as little risk and as little exposure as possible if that's actually a good idea or not, right? So look at a prototype, and then sometimes best practices work well at a pilot level, but then when you go to scale, you might run into issues. Not long ago, I think it was in October 2025, there was a report by MIT, kind of different, about, not specific to digital twins, but about AI implementations and adoptions, and it was that I think it was over 90% or 95% of pilots that were successful pilots, that were well-funded at enterprise level, failed when people tried to scale them, right? So what's important here is like the taking into account that best practices might work at a small level. When you scale them, they might not work, but that might be okay because it's still satisfying one of the use cases or multiple use cases without checking a full list of perfect answers for everything they were hoping for initially.
I'm actually going to go the opposite direction. So from our perspective, we are always trying to look at how we can build a new capability, right? So as opposed to coming up with the whatever the best practice is, we're going to try to find something that kind of works, that just might actually fulfill whatever this capability I need as quickly as possible, right? So maybe I'll start off with like a desktop model and then figure out how I can get that onto a hardware in the loop, then hardware on the loop, and then persistent testing environments, stuff like that. But some best practices that I want to be able to test 25, 50, 100,000 different test cases every day, all day, so I can understand that my entire system from tasking through dissemination will work every single time, and I know exactly how the nodes will be collected. I understand the parameters will go into it, the power models behind each one of the subsystems, so forth and so on, right? Well, that's not on day one, right? On day one, I need to say, I need to tweak this parameter to go do this thing, and I need to understand how that continuously grows. So the best fit really is to understand what the use case of that tool or that technology is needed, and then understanding, do I need to scale it? Because sometimes you don't need to scale it. You might just need this for this very short amount of time, and then understand, well, there might be a better solution. There might be a better practice or best practice for the entire industry, but is that actually indicative of my use case?
What I'm hearing is an homage to the old movie, What About Bob? Baby steps to the goal, and making sure we're doing things the right way, not being afraid to fall down sometimes and recover from where we are and move on, just like my computer running out of battery up here. So sorry about that. All right, so we know that data challenges, especially data integrations, are tricky. We know it brings lots of value. So, how do these technologies, how do we see them helping in the owner-contractor type paradigm of bringing those two groups together to make sure that the data is shared?
If you look at a project, if you trace a project from its inception to planning, design, construction, and then operations, it's a huge life cycle. It's not just 4 phases. A lot is going on there. So many stakeholders. And the data pattern between the handoffs look like a sawtooth. There are huge drops after every phase, every handoff. And what does that do? It creates more silos. By the time the rich BIM models or CAD drawings your design and construction teams put together make it to operations, which is the last phase, but the longest one, there's a lot of gap in the operational record. And what owners and operators often hand over is that fragmented systems sometimes that don't speak to each other, or static PDFs, or different shapes and forms of data that were not essentially designed to operate a system of record for a building operations. And next thing you know, the facilities owners or operators are reverse engineering their own buildings to be able to operate it, right? How does technology help? I mean, a GIS-based digital twin or indoor GIS as a layer 4 operations twin glues everything, anchors everything, all the faces and stakeholders, all the assets and location, and a shared coordinate system. And they continue building context on the top of what was creating in design, construction, as-builds. Then they bring in their 360-degree photos from commodity machines that they take and then attach it to their indoor maps, right? Then they bring real-time IoT data, again, in the same location-based GIS environment, make the environment and the infrastructure richer and richer instead of losing data or, creating gaps in the operational record of a building. So that's one way I see GIS or location as a glue connecting people, processes, and infrastructure lifecycle phases.
Yeah, this is a big problem we're trying to solve in the industry, is that design to construction handoff and construction handover to operations. One way that we're seeing a resolution is open standards. We're exploring and have had success with, open BIM, IFC type standards when, the designers designing their model, hand it over to the contractor. The contractor needs to be able to utilize that model in the field. So what is that platform? And we're not going to force contractors to start using Autodesk Construction Cloud or Bentley Systems. Sorry if there's any folks in here, but just having a candid conversation. They're going to use tools that are native to them. That's your Trimble, your Procore, your TopCon, so we can't force that platform onto them. So how do we make sure that data integrates? So we're having success with IFC, but that is a challenge that we're trying to solve, and maybe that's something AI can help us with. So Hamza will give you a call and something we can solve together.
Yeah, absolutely. No, actually, as we were speaking, I was thinking of something. I don't know if something like that has been done or not, but I love thinking that it's my idea. But something that's almost like a universal. Like, I travel a lot. When you travel, I always like to have the plug thing, the converter, right, in the wall, and it works for all countries. having something like that where it's like, I think that's where agentic AI and like having with LLMs, the beauty that they brought to us is contextual understanding and not necessarily structured outputs. It's an option to have a structured output, but unstructured outputs could potentially have like a universal API where these siloed tools that live separately today, you could potentially bridge them together, connect them together through something that takes something unstructured, formats it into a structured output that would be required input into the next tool, right? So that's definitely something we should explore, right?
So yes. Here we go. So one other thing. So actually, Scott brought this up during his talk. So it's really the key is to really break down the silos as much as possible. So to actually engage all the different stakeholders as early as possible, understanding that if you have an understanding of like what they want to do with the data, how they want to use it, that we actually are able to convey it across in the appropriate levels, right? So one of the things is it also allows you to do things like figure out what the ROI is for the entire group, right? If it's I'm building this capability and no one uses it, then I waste a bunch of money and nobody used it, right? Or on the other side, it might not be their most important thing that will actually bring a lot of benefit to the entire community. So it's just really understanding to bring those community groups or that community together, community practice early, so you can understand why you're doing things. Then, of course, find the appropriate tool and solution for it.
All right, so at this point, we are going to take some audience questions. So who would like to go first? We watched George stay up in front and wait till someone volunteered. So who's going to be the first question? Great.
Scotty asked challenging questions.
So no to Scotty?
The first question is, what time did everybody go to bed last night? Sorry. Insider information. So we talked about humans are the failure, right? Always. And you've got the design, the construction, and then the operations, and there's always a gap. We've been collecting data since probably the early 2000s, universally on buildings. And then you turn over, and then you got to the point where you're turning over the new model to the operations guy that's never opened a laptop in his life. And I think the world model maybe starts to get this, but how can we start to automate downloading of the operations, the systems, and then converting that and eliminating the human step that didn't upload the ticket, didn't do the operations, and then I think you're predicting. You can predict that the air handler is going to fail because you haven't changed the filters in 6 years.
I can say a couple things to that. This is where the multimodality comes in, right? Where in the past you used to have to sit there, or people still do that, where you've got to sit and write a report, a couple of pages to document the physical aspects of what happened. Because uploading a picture is inconvenient, or doing a voice note or taking a video is inconvenient. Somebody has to look at it and make sense of what that picture says. You still have to attach with it some documentation to explain what's in it. Multimodality helps with that because it can look at the picture, and with you just adding a sentence or two, it could extract enough information from it to write you a 20-page report, right? So now it's a lot faster. A snapshot of what happened that day or a report on what happened that week can be captured within a couple of minutes rather than an hour, 2, 3, 4 hours task that used to be in the past.
I mean, being a picture provider, right? So one of my goals is to basically give synoptic coverage of the globe within minutes. So if I'm doing that, that's a whole lot of data that no one's going to have the chance to look at every single pixel. But when I can also capture, depending on the resolution we're using, I can capture an entire building in a pixel. So if I want to understand all that data, we have to come up with basically AI agents or otherwise in order to really make sense of what I'm looking at. Right? Am I going to count tanks? Am I going to count aircraft? Am I going to count anything else? Or do I want to do something like damage determination of buildings?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So what we're seeing is it starts with data governance, right? You have to have some type of standards. That agency has to state, hey, when you're developing your BIM models, these are the asset requirements and attributes that must be within that. So it starts there. But a lot of times what we see those data governance standards, and you can probably attest to this, is those sit on the shelf and don't get enforced. So we've developed some tools that's able to validate that during the design and construction process. Okay, so now you get to post or construction's complete, and you want to hand over into the asset management system. That's maturing. It's not there quite yet, but what we're doing is, we've developed custom tools. We're able to map it to the asset management system. Ultimately, we'd love it one day if there was an easy button, and you click that easy button and automatically integrate it into the asset management system, which is also CMMS for folks in the room. So they're able to manage those assets, create their capital plan for maintenance on those assets, and then also alert the technicians when they need to be maintained. But right now, that's custom integrations. Love to chat offline if you want to hear more on that.
I think I'm on the same page. I was going to bring up custom applications and creating those solutions. We are all covered. Thank you for covering it. Today, there's no easy button. I see a lot of ETLs and custom applications for syncing systems and trying to not eliminate humans from the process, but help them as much as possible so they become the supervisors of the system rather than doing and creating more fault in the process.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for that
Can
question.
I just make a comment on that?
Yes, please do.
Just on that topic, collecting asset information, that's more pertinent to an owner, right? Because that's post-construction. These project teams get brought on to deliver projects on time and on budget. So I think collecting asset information becomes just one extra thing, although very, very important to the owner. So it's on the owner to get in there early, write a spec that says they do want that asset information in a clear, deliverable way so that they get it in that format. And so not really a question, just calling out that it's something that I'm seeing the industry trend towards, and it needs to, because construction is only 5% of a building's life cycle. That owner needs to get in there early, set the standard early, hopefully have some good software or good processes to aid them in that.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And I think that's where you start to see, whether it's Procore or Construction Cloud, you designed it, and then whoever's managing the project puts it in there, right? And then the submittals get run through there, and the submittals are now automatically feeding into. So it took us 15, 20 years to start to improve, and we're still not there. Because and whatever gets installed, that might actually not be what got submitted on the submittal. So different issue.
And I am with Procore, so thank you for the shout out.
Thank you. All right, next question. We still have some more time here. Shirley.
So where's the balance between having the right processes and governance and actually trying to move forward and be innovative and keep up with the pace of technology? I think especially I do most of my focus area is the federal government. And so there is the challenge of you're trying to help a client transition from paper to Excel, now Excel, and then you talk about like they want to get into predictive analytics and AI, and it's like there's just so many steps. But how do you just get out of planning for a long time? By the time they start implementing, they're already a generation behind.
Yeah, that's a great question, Shirley. That was not a planted question, I swear.
It was
so that's a very good question. The way I think of addressing something like that is like baby steps, right? Like just because the change management is going to be the hardest part, and then the regulations change management is not just because we're scared of change, it's because like you said, there are guardrails, there are regulations that are there and in place for a lot of industries that will block that quick adoption of what's already existing, the tools that are out there. But another thing is recognizing that to capture the full value, from my perspective, and I'm very biased to AI, is you need AI native solutions. And what that means is it's not just the website, which is something that's happened across different industries and now it's being regulated, but we started seeing every single company out there saying we're AI powered, AI enabled, right? And they have a chatbot. They have 2 lines of code that call to ChatGPT and they're AI enabled. We all saw it, right? It's kind of offensive, but when you're like actually building AI models. But what ends up happening there is it's a good place to start, where you are open to it, you're adopting AI tools, you're adopting the concept of AI, and you're okay with it as a tag on to your existing flows. So if they were living in PDFs, you give them an assistant that helps them in PDF. So now they're open to the idea, and then you get rid of the concept of PDFs and you build an AI native solution that deals with just digital data from the ground up, right? So it's a big investment and it's a big step to go into that AI native space, but start with the baby steps of tag-ons, and then it gets to a point where it's like you've band-aided this so much, time to rebuild natively.
Right. So I also want to say it's really dependent on what your industry is, right? So if you have something that has reliability requirements that are going out to 6, 7, 8, 9s, then that's going to really drive a lot of what your adoption is going to be, right? Because if I take on, say, a new AI model and it fails in 2 days, that's probably not good for me, right? It's actually not good for anybody here. So one of the things we do is we do a lot of intensive understanding of exactly what the failure mechanisms are, so then we can then understand where there's the least amount of risk to implement new things, new strategies, new things, or otherwise. So like if for me, I'm not going to potentially use AI for a lot of our like flight software because that cannot fail. That cannot get stuck in a loop. I cannot potentially, blue screen of death in my satellite. That's a bad day, right? It's happened, but it's a bad day, right? And that's because it's gone through all the different checks and rigors and stuff like that. But then you find that you'll get a random stray electron that will get stuck in the gate and will actually cause that logic to fail because it never happened, even in the mechanical space. But so along those lines, though, if you know that you have something that's more forgiving, say like a ground processing type step, then yes, I can put in a few other steps. I can put in new technology. I can use it for sense making because the data is still there. And if I need to fall back to a previous process, I can. But you just have to understand what the risk you're willing to take and what the reward is.
I would say quick wins. So an example of that is no one likes data entry, right? Especially looking at a PDF and hand typing that data. So when I was working with a owner agency, and this is like 7 years ago when OCR was fairly new. So you're able to ingest a PDF document, scrape all the data from that, and add it into Excel sheet or whatever it may be. So that was a quick win, and that got buy-in from the naysayers and really started kind of a coalition where we're able to grow that into something bigger. But start small, quick wins. And if we have time for a failure story, I have a good one.
There are different ways to go about it. Everything, especially quick wins. Also, part of it is education and enablement. I think that there comes the responsibility of technology providers to provide more awareness materials. Here's why you need this solution, or maybe you don't need this solution. And here are the next 5 steps for success, right? Providing more maybe webinars or more interactive forms, sometimes in conferences, having small group meetings and creating that awareness with the customers could be a way, at least in the product world. Sometimes we approach it in a way that let's sit down with our customers, listen to the pain points, okay? One of the recent calls was like, if you keep doing what you're doing today, it's going to take another 11 years for you to be able to map only 1,000 buildings. There is a faster way to do it. Here's how, right? It's not a failure, it's their success. That's just piecemeal. Also, partners, business partners are important. They are not alone in implementing a technology. There are specialized partners in indoor GIS implementation, like HNTB, who knows the ropes, teaches the ropes, and then goes ahead and then implements an indoor GIS at a scale for various verticals, right? Especially transportation in this example. But reliance on awareness materials, more closer contact with the customer in the government space, all that. Failure story, 5 minutes.
No, we have time.
No.
I think we have time. Yeah, Rome wasn't built in a day. Great comments. Yes, Michael, why don't you go ahead and tell us your failure story?
So I spent 12 years at an owner agency. I'm not going to name which, but that first slide we had, or the first question we had up with all the data, right? The data layers. So this owner agency, we were fairly advanced. We had the data, we had the capabilities to do a lot, and we had the technology stack to do it. And we also had some executive buy-in too, not fully, and I'll get to that. So we said, hey, we have all the components of a digital twin. This is in like 2017. Let's build one. And this was a county agency. Let's build one at the county level. We were managing 800 buildings, 100 miles of roads and bridges, an international airport. We go, this will be perfect. We'll gain insights that we never knew we had. Let's just put the data together and visualize it. Well, we started doing that, and we're able to visualize it. And the executives come in and they're like, great, what's that data tell me? What's the ROI and all that investment that you just did? And we're like, what? It gives you it describes, how many planes are coming in. It describes, how the temperature in that room is on your building. Isn't this great? And he goes, no, we have people already managing that. What does this solve? So lesson of this story is start your digital twin with a problem. Have that problem statement first. What are you trying to solve? And then build your capabilities, your data, your technology stack around that. It's a lot more effective, I can tell you from experience, and you'll get a lot more executive buy-in by doing that.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. Okay, so we have time for one more question. Is there someone else who has a question? Yeah? Okay, well then I'll pose a question to you guys. What do you see as the next emerging technology that's coming to disrupt the market?
I sound like I'm repeating myself here, but I'm betting on world models, right? It was last week, and I was really excited. I have a lot of my team members working in Jordan, so I waited till they woke up. It's like 1 or 2 a.m. my time, and I jumped on a call with them, invited people that usually do not work together, but I figured they're very curious people, these 4 that I brought together. And I was like, hey, leave everything you're working on, and you're going to just explore for the next month and build me demos with agentic AI, right? Things that can be pre-built. We build them and offer them to people to use or to customers to use. And then potentially, like a playground where people can come in and build for their own workflows. And then now just doing like deeper research into world models. So I'm betting on those. I'll keep mentioning them. I sound like a broken record, but that's what I think would really disrupt.
All right, thanks, Hamza.
All right, anyway, so I would say that I wouldn't call it necessarily emerging technology, but I would say that there's just more access to either geospatial data or otherwise, right? So how we can really understand what's happening in all the environments and all the different aspects of the electromagnetic spectrum, right? So we have ability to get EO, SAR, RF, and everything else. So if you want to understand what's happening right now, you have a sensor that's not necessarily inside your structure, but actually can see everything else around you. Because a few other people have mentioned, at least a few times today, is that our communities are just, it's past our building, it's past our campus, it's past our county, right? Because everything's all tied together, right? These are all integrated lifelines, right? Because, so if I lose power here, what are the impacts for this county? What are the impacts for this hospital? What are the impacts for my ground station? And how does that all come back together? So, access to data.
Well, mine's going to be much more boring. I'm in an industry that's not as advanced as yours. So I'm gonna say integrations, like just being able to connect systems. We call it system of systems. And shameless plug, there's recently a multimodal digital twin paper that we published through the Digital Twin Consortium that kind of highlights this. But how do we get an airport talking to a transit agency, talking to a DOT? And the insights that we can gain from that are just tremendous. So I would love, the integrations I think is going to be very valuable moving forward.
I don't think it's boring, it's valid. I think enabling systems or different pieces of technologies, those fragmented ones that we are talking about, making them speak to each other through integrations is one. Also, my boring example is maybe not so emerging, but more and more reality capture or 360-degree imagery applications are becoming commonplace. It's becoming a routine for keeping the facility information up to date, bringing more visual context into your workflows. And it's just expanding. I mean, yesterday what we call out as, oh, this is just new technology, it's just a toy I purchased. You see that running on construction sites, robot dogs and all that, becoming more purposeful, adjusting to the workflows and processes we have. So I see that pattern growing with especially AI and more purposeful AI adding to it.
All right, thank you. All right, so we are at time. And so I'd like to give these guys a round of applause, but before we do, I want to make sure that anybody who's out in the hallway regrets that they didn't come into the session. So if you can cheer as loud as possible, that would be great. So please, round of applause for this wonderful panel. All right, so we have some bad news and some good news. The bad news is we are no longer going to have a wrap up in the main room, and the good news is that you have opportunities to come talk to these guys. I'm sure every one of them has a business card, and the amount of knowledge up here is just astounding. So please take advantage of it. Come chat with them, and thank you so much for attending Building for Tomorrow, and have a great day.